Welcome to Authored by Us, a podcast celebrating children's books about characters of color or of different cultural experiences, and the authors who bring these diverse works to life. Each week, we invite you to join us as we turn the pages of these bookshelf gems and hear from their creators who understand that stories of diverse experience truly come to life when authored by us. Here's your host, Zenzi Hodge.
Greetings and welcome back, listeners. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Authored by Us. This week, we are joined by Joanne Moorehead, and she is here to share with us her book, What Color is Your Rainbow? Welcome to the show, Joanne.
Hi, Zenzi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited for this.
Well, I'm excited to have you here, Joanne. So, full disclosure, listeners, I've known Joanne for several years, and we had this conversation at the beginning of 2019. And we stood outside and we were talking about books because I know that Joanne loves to read, but I discovered in that conversation that she also loves to write. And she started sharing with me that she had an idea for a book, and it started there. And then what happened was she produced What Color is Your Rainbow? So, Joanne, tell us about this book.
The book, it's a very simple, a board book, a picture book. And it's What Color is Your Rainbow is literally about the rainbow. I know these days the rainbow has several different connotations, but this one is about the actual rainbow. And the colors of the rainbow. When I was a kid, I remember learning ROY G BIV were the colors of the rainbow. And I was having a conversation with one of the little people in my life. And I said, ROY G BIV, we saw a rainbow or something. And I said, gee, the colors of the rainbow, ROY G BIV. And the kid looked at me like I was crazy. So I figured, not all the old things are irrelevant, right? Like I know they have their iPads now and all of those things, but they still learn their colors in preschool or kindergarten or at home or wherever, as a young child. And so I had this story that I that I had created. So I decided to do a rainbow color book. I figured rainbow, it's colorful. I thought the illustrations would be fun. And so it really is a book just to teach children the colors of the rainbow, the ROY G BIV colors.
Now, Joanne, even though you describe this as being a simple board book, it's really not. You've designed it in such a way that it is able to grow with the reader as they get older, correct?
What I find is the toddler age, where they're just learning their colors. So it works well because the colors are really vivid and really bright. And then it's pretty simple. The pictures in the beginning and the words like red, orange, yellow, those are colors that they know very well and that are pretty simple for them in the beginning, especially as they progress and are learning how to read. The pictures are also pictures that they would recognize. They're going to know what an apple is. They might not know fire truck, but they're going to know truck. They're going to know banana, pencil, those things. So as they read through the book, but then they get to the colors at the end, which I find most kids don't really know these days, the indigo, the violet. You have multisyllabic words. You have, and then I have, is it blue like a cornflower and a bell tower and those things where you have compound words. So that even in the reading of the book, as you get a little bit older, so 6, 7-year-olds who are 5, 6, 7-year-olds who are learning how to read, they start off really confident, like, oh, this is so easy. And then they get to the end and even the words make it a little more challenging. And they, I think by the end, they're like, oh, what's this word? And, trying to sound out the compound words is quite interesting, seeing them and trying to figure out indigo, the beta fish and all of these things that, they have probably seen, but they just don't know how to spell it. They don't know how to read it. So it turned out to be a little bit more than even just the colors. I think it's a really good reading primer also.
The first thing I noticed about your book are the vibrant colors on the cover, but the colors don't fill the rainbow completely until the end. Was that intentional?
Sure was. I found an illustrator, and I really had an opportunity. I guess I would have to say, fortunately, English was not his first language. And so, in trying to explain my book to this person who didn't speak English as a first language, so even he was having, some questions about the text of the story. And so I had an opportunity to really nail the illustrations, specifically what I wanted. And so because I named it "What Color Is Your Rainbow," I wanted to leave the door open for the fact that although ROY G BIV, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, are the colors of the rainbow, that doesn't have to be your rainbow. Your rainbow can be whatever it is, that gives you. I mean, if we really wanted to get a little deeper, your rainbow is whatever it is that reminds you that there is something sunnier coming, right? We all have whatever the thing is that makes the rainbows come. What the weather, the bad weather, the dreary days, the stormy skies, if you want to get really metaphorical. But there is something, whatever color your rainbow is. There are colors that I know. I love yellow, and it makes me think of sunshine and lemons and happy, and blue makes me think of calm and sea and ocean and sky and peace. And all of those colors, but there's so many other colors. So I wanted to leave the rainbow, just the pieces at the end, blank for interpretation, open for any child's interpretation.
And what's interesting is that you didn't leave the opportunities for interpretation there. You took it a bit further when you created your activity book and your coloring book. You also give your readers something else to engage with as they learn and as they grow.
Right. I think that even when I tested the book out with my young people, there are so many other things that are red or orange or blue, and so I didn't the board book, because it can't be that long. I only did two objects per color for the board book. But if the child says, "Well, what about strawberries?" are red, so we put some additional images in the coloring book so they could color them themselves. And what color is your rainbow? One of my one of my nieces, she seems like she's already got a creative artistic mind going, and she's like, well, it could be anything. So now you can color your the coloring book says, are your strawberries red? But maybe they're purple, or maybe they're some other color, teal or turquoise. So coloring is fun, but also I think it is my grandmother in me, where I feel like as much as it is fun, you can have fun learning even if you don't realize that you're learning. And so the puzzles for me, that is something I know my mom, my brother, and I, we always had puzzle books when we traveled or if we were going on a trip. If we, I mean, not, this is pretty sad to say, but if we were going to a party, we'd always have like a puzzle book. I loved word search as a kid, like trying to find all the words. And then I would try to find words that weren't even on the list, right?
That's right.
So, and then, then I graduated as I got older to the crossword puzzles. My mom was a big crossword puzzle fan. And so I started sneaking her crossword puzzles to see if I could beat her. And so it just, I think, is a fun way to incorporate learning if you do different things and different activities, and all the while you're learning, even though you might not even realize that these are things that are sinking in.
Now, Joanne, you mentioned spending time with your grandmother. And growing up in the Caribbean, as you and I did, we both know that spending time with your grandparents after school, it wasn't just the place you went to kick your shoes off at the end of the day. It really meant part two of your school day.
I am the product of educator grandmothers. And my mother loved to read. And my brother and I, from the time we were really small children and could read, we have always been big avid readers. My grandmother, that I spent a lot of time with as a child, I told you she was an educator, and she used to, when I was a kid, she had retired by the time I was in school. And so I got the benefit of all her principalness and all of her schooling after school. So she used to have fun making worksheets for me with words on them. Her favorite things were coming up with worksheets and about the difference between homonyms and antonyms and synonyms and all of the different kinds of words. And she would make pages and pages on legal pad, yellow legal pad, of of lists of words for me to play with and figure out and all of those things. And I mean, it's one of those things that now is really an indelible part of me and the way I think, because that was fun for me. She had so much fun making the lists, and she would have so much fun finding words that rhymed or finding words that sounded the same but were spelled differently and all of those things. And she made language interesting and fun for me.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with our author, Joanne Moorehead. Welcome back. We're here with Joanne Moorehead, author of What Color is Your Rainbow? Now, Joanne, even with this being a book intended for younger readers, you close the book with a message that appeals to children of all ages.
I'm very much an advocate of acknowledging and giving children the space to acknowledge that they have non-happy feelings sometimes. I think that is really important. And I think, without getting too deep, I think that I wish I had that when I was a child, an outlet or an avenue for me to acknowledge that sometimes I wasn't always in a great mood. I wasn't always happy, bubbly, and the adults in my life very often would be like, oh, why you look so sad? Oh, snap out of it, that kind of way. And so I think I have even a few other books that I wrote, and I think they sort of trend the same way, where it's important for me, young child, middle-aged child, teenager, it's really important for me that children know that their non-happy feelings are normal, that everybody has non-happy feelings, and that sometimes those feelings are really heavy, but a lot of times they will not remain permanent. And that there is almost always, I don't want to say always, because I know, how it is not the same for everybody, but there's almost always something positive to hold on to and something to look forward to. So, I mean, the ending is important for me. The message is important for me, even though it is just a color about books. A book about colors. It is. I guess it's just something that I really is important for me to convey to children. I think that the mental health and well-being of our children is really, really important. And waiting until they get to be teenagers to talk about it sometimes is too late for some kids. Not all, but some. Some children have a lot to deal with and a lot going on in their tiny little bodies, but that are real. And so I think sort of trying to have the start of that conversation where we can have an open discussion about feelings. But yet, you might have a sad day, a bad day, a mad day, but there's still a good day coming on the other end.
So, Joanne, with this being a book that is really intended to teach colors, you could have taken it in any direction with your characters. But in addition to teaching colors, you decided to teach something else. You presented two characters of color in your story, a young boy and a young girl. And the young girl had the most amazing afro puff. Why was it important for you to depict characters of color in a book about the colors of the rainbow?
One of the things, as I've gotten older, I realize the importance of representation, and I remember even as far back. How old is my goddaughter now? She's 16. So when she was about 4 or 5, I'm one of those aunties who loves to give books to children as they grow old. I love to give books. I already said I'm a word nerd, I'm a book nerd, whatever you want to call it. I'm okay with that. And so I like to give books. And I remember when she was about 4 or 5, I was looking for books to give her. And I wanted to find books that with characters that looked like her. And I remember it was quite a search to find those books, but I found a book where the grandma in the book was a Puerto Rican grandma, and in the book she was making red beans and rice, and I loved the book. And I was like, oh, where were books like that when I was a kid? Although, let me tell you, I love Anne of Green Gables. I love Judy Blume and Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I love all of those books. I love them. But how much more in love would I have been had I had one book where a kid in the story looked like me or my brother, or had a mom like mine, who looked like mine, who sounded like mine. And so it became really important to me when I was doing the illustrations and coming up with the cover art, that I really wanted the children, in particular where I live. I didn't have a very big macro plan for this book, but I knew certainly here in the Virgin Islands where I live and where I'm from, that I would be doing things here with children, hoping to get maybe going to Head Start programs or kindergarten classes and sharing my book. And it was really important to me that when I shared my book, that the children on the cover of my book looked like the majority of the children in the classes that I would be going to, and looked like me and looked like my family. It also sort of comes from one of my favorite quotes I heard from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and it stuck with me for years. And then, of course, she died last year. Somebody asked her about the number of women on the Supreme Court and when would they have enough women on the Supreme Court. And her answer was, it was 9 white men for 100 and something years, and nobody batted an eye. Again, a paraphrase. And it really stuck with me because I feel the same way. When I was a child, all the Barbies were white. And not that there's nothing wrong with it. I think we should play with, if you're going to play with dollies, you play with whatever dollies you want to play with. But I think that there is something to be said when you look on a shelf and you see, not pardon the pun, but you see a rainbow of dollies that look different instead of all the same. I go into a classroom. I went to a 4th grade classroom, and the diversity in the classroom with children of all ethnicities and backgrounds, to me, then what we're reading should reflect what we live. And so it was really, really important to me to have children of color on my cover. There are there are other children in the book, other children characters that are not of color, that are different. But I really wanted to have children of color on the cover, because I feel that, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when it was the opposite, nobody batted an eye. And I don't think that there's anything, I kind of made a vow to myself that all of my books would have children of color on the cover. That doesn't mean that it's just about children of color. It's not, my book has nothing to do with characters per se. It's about rainbow colors, but it's important to me that children see themselves in whatever it is. It's something as innocuous and simple as colors of the rainbow, but there I am. So it just is something I think that nowadays there is a movement, all the hashtags, right? Own voices, representation matters, all of those things that I love to see. And so I guess I'm just part of the one little cog in that wheel, but I think it's going to be a good one. I'm excited to see how children change their perceptions of self once they see that they are included in the entirety of literature versus having just one little shelf by themselves.
Sometimes parents tend to read to their children when they're young, and once that child can read to themselves, sometimes the reading together stops. And later on, those children stop reading for enjoyment and only find themselves reading as a part of a school assignment. How do you think parents can help to develop a joy of reading within their children that extends beyond the read to me stage?
That's a really great question. I struggle with this too, because even the kids in my life, when they're younger and they can't read for themselves, it's easy to sit them on your lap or cuddle up in bed and we read the book together and they enjoy it. And then once they get a little bit older and they have friends and iPad and YouTube channels and all of these things that are also interesting, but that grab their attention and are easier, so to speak, because they don't have to struggle with words and figuring out meanings, and it's also visual and audio and all of these other multisensory things that I think it becomes a challenge. But one of the things I like to try, I'm not always very successful, but I do try, is that I tell them, okay, well, why don't we read it together? We'll read it at the same time, and then we can talk about it. Like if you read 2 chapters and I'll read the 2 chapters, and then we can talk about it. It's sort of similar to like if you were watching a TV show together and then at the end of the episode, you're like, oh, can you believe that happened or this happened? Or, I try, like I said, I'm not always successful. I think the older they get, the less inclined they are to indulge me.
And there's something that you said that's really important about finding out what interests your child. A friend asked me recently, she said, Zenzi, I didn't realize you liked comics so much. I said, I have a kid who loves comics, or as he calls them, graphic novels. So I read what he reads. And that you have to meet your child, your reader, your student where they are and build that connection.
I love what you said, right? That you read what he reads, because I think that is half of it also. If you want to, it's not just showing interest in him, but it's showing an interest in the things that he's interested in as well. And then I think that bridges a whole other, conversation. You can have conversations about things and it leads to other things. If you are willing to read his book, then maybe he'll be willing to read your book one day.
Now, Joanne, to bring What Colors Your Rainbow to life, you not only self-published, you also started your own publishing company. Tell us about that.
I think I just, somewhere way down the road, I had an image, a goal, a mission to have a woman-owned publishing company based in the Caribbean. I think would be really cool. I mean, I know that there must be others, right, like yours. The conversation that you and I had helped form this kernel in my head that just kept turning over. Ultimately, I would like for it to be not just my books. And then the name Genjo is of course inspired by my mother. It's actually my mother's name and my name, because, again, if it weren't for her, I wouldn't be doing it. I guarantee. Her and my grandmother and some of the other women in my life. It's just, they are in everything that I do still, although they're not here, and they will always be, because it's just the imprint.
Tell us where we can find your book, Joanne.
At the moment, the book is available only on my website, which is www.genjo, Jenjo, Jen for Jennifer, Joe for Joanne, genjopublishing.com. You can buy the board book, you can buy the activity book, and there's a bundle if you buy both. You can also now get it on Amazon for the Kindle Fire, or you have to have a Kindle Fire or one of the Kindle apps on your iPad or your iPhone or your phone, because it is a picture book, and so it has to have color. So only the Kindle Fire and the apps on the mobile, the what do you call those things? The
tablets.
Sorry, the tablets or your cell phone only have the ability to have the color pictures. So perhaps later on for middle grade or chapter books, when I do that, they'll have a full-on ebook version, but not at this time. So genjopublishing.com.
And listeners, links to Genjo Publishing will be available in our podcast notes. We'll be right back with more from Joanne Moorehead.
Hi, my friends, it's me, Mr. Pete. I want to tell you about my show, Mr. Pete's Playhouse, and invite you and your children to sing, dance, learn, and create amazing memories with me every week. Join me for my adventures as we find music in the noise and learn to love ourselves no matter where we come from or what we look like. So follow me on social media at Mr. Pete's Playhouse and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll see you soon.
You're listening to Authored by Us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show with your host, Zenzi Hodge.
So Joanne, you're an avid reader and now a writer. So if a story was being written about Joanne Moorehead, who would be the author? What would be the genre and why?
Wow. That is a hard question. I would like to say, first off, that I don't think I've lived an interesting enough life yet for her to write my story. But if I could pick anybody, any author, I think I would pick Chimamanda Adichie. She wrote Americana, Half of a Yellow Sun, and a couple other books. She is Nigerian. Her writing is amazing. I love her writing. I will read anything she writes, and I've listened to her speak. I will listen to her speak about anything. I just really, really like her a lot. So I guess if I shoot for the stars there, let me go way to the top. And so I think I would love to think that there was something interesting enough in my life for her to make a story about it. But that is what it is. I think she's the first one that pops into my head.
So tell us, Joanne, what was the book that had the most impact on you as a child?
It's a hard question to answer, right? I remember, and I mentioned a couple of them already. Like, I really, really liked the Anne of Green Gables series by Ella Montgomery as a child. And I remember wanting, like, oh, I want to get the next one, and I want to get the next one. Book series, man, I am a sucker for book series. I love that the book doesn't end. But I think that I really started to lock into myself and my reading, and I really started to think of reading differently when I read I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. It just, again, I think it was probably, I was in probably 7th or 8th grade. It was probably one of the first books, and I'm saying probably because I really don't remember, but it was probably one of the first books that I had read by a Black person. And then it was a story, and she, I mean, it was a true story, but it was, even in that story, she talks about her love of reading and how she didn't talk and the traumas in her life. And, it was still such a powerful story. And I really remember sort of like honing in on that book, like reading it and going, wow, like this is powerful. One of the books, I don't often reread books because there's so many books that I have still to read that I feel like I'll never read all the books I want to read. So I don't often reread books, but for some reason, one of the books that I have read many times is Roots by Alex Haley, and also To Kill a Mockingbird. Those two I have read multiple times. And so, I mean, I could go on and on about the books that I love, but I think those are some of the earliest books that I know for sure were sort of framed my reading life.
What do you think inspires the next generation of writers?
I think it's the same thing that inspires every generation of writers. Every person, I think, lives their life and has experiences. And I think the thing about writers, at least, actually, I saw a quote by James Baldwin, I think it was. And again, I'm going to butcher it badly because I don't remember exactly what it is. But essentially, the quote is, and why I love reading is because reading, and so by extension, writing, you think that you're the only person who feels this particular way or who has had this particular experience until you open a book and you read it. And so I feel that writers, I don't think, I might be wrong, I could very well be wrong, but I don't think there are writers that exist that are not also readers. And so I think that it is the universal need to share an experience and a feeling, or to to be able to express those feelings, and it's an outlet for writers. But I think it is something that readers need.
Joanne, it has been wonderful spending this time with you, hearing about your wonderful book, but also where you share with us your love of reading and how that translated into you now creating books for others to enjoy. So thank you for spending the time with our listeners here on Authored by Us.
Zenzi, I thank you so much for having me, first of all, but I am thrilled to death that you have this Authored by Us podcast. I'm so excited to hear the other folks that you're going to bring, because I know you have lived many different places and you have a very wide circle. And I know you're going to bring some really interesting, fun, exciting people to the podcast. And so I myself am looking very much forward to hearing about those folks. And so, you and I could talk for hours and hours and hours about this kinds of topics. So I appreciate you having me and letting me ramble on, and good luck to you.
So listeners, as we close the cover on this bookshelf gem, I would like to thank our author, Joanne Moorehead, for joining us today to share her book, What Color is Your Rainbow? Remember to check our podcast notes so you can find purchase options for What Color is Your Rainbow, the board book, the activity book, and of course, the coloring book. We would also like to thank this episode's sponsor, Mr. Pete's Playhouse. Mr. Pete's Playhouse is a children's program starring its host, Julio Peterson, who is also from the U.S. Virgin Islands, and he takes children of all ages on a fun learning adventure, which includes various segments of songs, dance, readings, and so much more. Lastly, this episode would not be possible without you, our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Authored by Us. We look forward to you joining us next week for another author sharing their book. Until next time, happy reading.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Authored by Us. Every author has a story to tell, and we enjoy bringing their stories to you each week. Whether you are listening as a young reader or are sharing this podcast with the young readers in your life, we are delighted to celebrate these stories inspired by diversity and shared in the voice of their authors. Follow us on social media at Authored by Us and subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast app. That way you never miss an episode. Have a gem on your bookshelf that we should have on ours? Visit us online at authoredbyus.com and let us know. Until next time, happy reading.